I never imagined love would teach me a new language. Not poetry, not flowers, not the kind of love that arrives loudly and announces itself to the world, but a quiet, patient love that lived in pauses, glances, and hands that spoke without sound. When I first met Ethan, I thought that kind of love was rare and precious. I thought I had been chosen. We met the ordinary way, through friends, coffee turning into long walks turning into a life that slowly stitched itself together. Ethan was charming in a gentle way. He listened when I spoke. He remembered small things. He made me feel safe, like the world was less sharp when he was near. When he proposed, kneeling in our small apartment with nervous hands and hopeful eyes, I said yes without hesitation. Our families blended quickly, or at least it seemed that way. That was when I met Lily, Ethan's younger sister. She was deaf, something Ethan mentioned casually, as if it were a footnote instead of a defining part of her world. Lily's presence filled a room without noise. Her eyes were observant, curious, often amused. Conversations around her shifted effortlessly into sign language, hands moving faster than I could follow, laughter passing between them like a private current. I smiled, I nodded, I laughed when everyone else did, but inside I felt something I didn't want to admit: distance. At family dinners, stories flowed without me. At holidays, jokes were shared silently across the table. No one excluded me on purpose. I knew that. Still, the silence wrapped around me like glass. I was there, but not fully present. One evening, as we drove home from Ethan's parents' house, I finally said it. I wish I could understand her. I murmured, staring out the window. Ethan reached for my hand. You don't need to. Lily knows you care. I nodded, but something in his answer felt unfinished. That night, while Ethan slept beside me, his breathing slow and even, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept seeing Lily's hands, her expressions, the way an entire conversation lived in movement instead of sound. I didn't want to be the woman who stood on the edge of her own family, so I made a decision. I downloaded a sign language app. I ordered a book. I started learning, silently. I told no one, not Ethan, not Lily, not even my closest friend. This wasn't about praise or approval. It was about respect, about belonging, about love that showed up without being asked. Every night became a ritual. After dishes were done, after wedding planning exhausted me, after Ethan fell asleep scrolling through his phone, I sat at the edge of the bed practicing. Fingers stiff at first, movements awkward. I whispered the meanings to myself, even though the language didn't require sound. Hello, thank you, family, love. Some nights I failed miserably. I mixed signs, forgot gestures, felt foolish. But I kept going, because love, real love, wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to stretch you. As the wedding approached, life blurred into schedules and expectations, dress fittings, guest lists, seating charts that somehow caused more arguments than joy. Everyone told me I was glowing. Everyone said I must be excited. I was, but there were moments, small, almost invisible ones, where Ethan felt far away. He took calls in another room. He smiled without warmth. He kissed my forehead instead of my lips. When I asked if he was okay, he blamed stress. Work, responsibility, I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I was planning a future, a home, children, traditions. I imagined signing stories to Lily's future kids. Imagined holidays where silence didn't mean separation anymore. I imagined myself as someone who had learned love deeply enough to change for it. A week before the wedding, we stayed at Ethan's parents' house to help with final arrangements. The place was full voices, laughter, overlapping conversations. I moved between rooms, helping where I could, smiling until my cheeks hurt. And all the while, my hands were learning secrets. I could understand slow conversations now, simple phrases. Enough to follow emotions, if not every word. I felt proud of myself, though no one knew. This was my surprise. My gift, my silent promise to the family I was about to marry into. That night, I caught Lily watching me strangely, her gaze lingering as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. When I smiled at her, she looked away quickly. I told myself she was nervous about the wedding. We all were. I went to bed believing in the life I was about to step into. I didn't know that the language I learned for love was about to teach me the truth. In that silence, the thing I once feared was about to become the loudest sound of my life. The moment that changed everything didn't arrive with drama or warning. It came quietly like betrayal always does. The house was alive that evening. Ethan's parents were hosting one last gathering before the wedding, and relatives drifted in and out of rooms carrying food, laughter, and stories that repeated themselves year after year. I moved automatically, helping where I could, smiling when expected, my mind half occupied with seating charts and timelines. At some point, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I remembered leaving it upstairs, on the dresser in the guest room Ethan and I were using. I excused myself and walked down the hallway, the noise fading behind me as the house grew quieter. That was when I noticed the den door slightly open. Inside, Ethan was standing with his cousin Mark and his best man, Daniel. Lily sat on the arm of the couch, her legs swinging absently. The television was off, no music, no voices. They were signing. I slowed without thinking, my steps soft against the carpet. I wasn't trying to spy. I had no reason to. I only meant to pass by. Then Ethan laughed. It wasn't the laugh he used with me. This one was sharper. Looser, the kind that didn't ask permission. His hands moved confidently, casually, as if he were saying something harmless. I understood him. She has no idea, he signed. None. My body went cold. Mark responded with exaggerated gestures, his expression amused. You're really going through with it. Ethan shrugged, his mouth curling into a grin. Why not? She's perfect for this. Loyal, predictable, she'll do anything to keep the peace. My fingers curled into fists, the air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I told myself I must be misunderstanding. That maybe my lessons weren't good enough yet. That context mattered. But then Daniel signed, slower, clearer. You don't love her. Ethan didn't hesitate. I love what she gives me. He replied, stability, a good image, someone who won't challenge me. Each sign landed like a blow. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain they could hear it through the walls. I pressed my hand against my mouth, afraid I would make a sound, afraid I would give myself away before I understood everything. Lily's hands moved next, hesitant, her eyes flicking toward the hallway as if she sensed something. She's kind, Lily signed, she trusts you. Ethan rolled his eyes, that's the point, he signed. She believes in fairy tales. Marriage will settle her down. She won't notice things. She never does. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't stress. This was truth spoken freely because they believed I couldn't hear it. Mark laughed silently. You're lucky. Most women ask too many questions. Ethan smirked. Exactly. She's easy, easy. The word echoed inside my skull, louder than any scream. I took a step back, my heel catching on the edge of the carpet. Panic surged through me. I turned and moved quickly down the hall, into the bathroom, closing the door with a careful click. The moment the lock turned, my body gave out. I slid to the floor, my back against the door, hands shaking uncontrollably. My breath came in shallow bursts, my chest tight as if something heavy sat there, crushing every thought. I didn't cry at first. I stared at the tiled floor, replaying the conversation again and again, my mind searching desperately for mercy, some sign I'd misunderstood, some hint that this wasn't real. But the signs were clear, the meaning was clear. The man I was about to marry did not love me. Tears came silently then, hot and relentless. I pressed my forehead to my knees, swallowing sobs so no one would hear. My engagement ring felt heavy, like a lie wrapped around my finger. I stayed there longer than I should have, long enough for my breathing to slow, long enough for something else to rise beneath the pain. Clarity, I stood, washed my face, practiced smiling in the mirror. The reflection looking back at me seemed older, quieter, but steady. When I returned to the living room, no one noticed anything different. Ethan smiled at me, kissed my cheek, asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I said, and I was, not fine in the way he meant, but fine enough to survive. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I didn't turn toward him like I always did. I stared at the ceiling, counting breaths, feeling something inside me harden into resolve. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry into his chest. I didn't ask why, because he thought I was powerless. And I was about to show him how dangerous it is to underestimate a woman who understands the language of your lies. The morning after the truth revealed itself, the world didn't stop. Sunlight still filtered through the curtains. Birds still sang. The wedding countdown still blinked cheerfully on my phone. Life, cruelly indifferent, carried on as if nothing had shattered inside me. Ethan woke before me, stretching, yawning, pressing a lazy kiss to my temple. "Big day of errands," he said lightly. "You okay?" I opened my eyes and smiled. The same smile I'd practiced in the mirror the night before. "Calm, soft, believable, of course," I said, just tired. He accepted that without question. Of course he did. I was easy. From that moment on, I lived two lives. One belonged to the woman everyone saw, the bride-to-be who laughed at jokes, confirmed guest counts, and debated flower arrangements. The other lived quietly beneath the surface, observant and patient, recording every detail. I watched Ethan differently now. I noticed how carefully he chose his words around me, how his affection felt rehearsed rather than instinctive. I noticed how often he checked his phone, how quickly he stepped outside to take calls. I noticed the absence of guilt in his eyes. Not once did he hesitate, not once did he falter. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. I began to gather proof, not out of spite, but necessity. I saved messages he left open on shared devices. I listened when he spoke too freely to friends who thought I was naive. I documented everything quietly, methodically, like someone building an exit rather than a weapon. At night, when he slept, I returned to sign language. Only now the lessons felt different. Every sign sharpened my understanding not just of words, but of deception. Language, I realized, was never just about communication. It was about power, about who was allowed to know the truth. Lily avoided me at first. She hovered at the edges of rooms, guilt pulling her shoulders inward. One afternoon, I found her alone on the back porch, staring at nothing. I sat beside her without speaking. After a moment, she looked at me, her hands trembling slightly as she signed. "I wanted to warn you." I met her eyes and answered, in sign language. "I know." Her breath caught. Tears welled instantly, spilling over as she signed frantically. "I thought you didn't understand. I didn't know what to do. I understand now," I replied gently. "That's enough." She nodded, crying silently, and in that moment I forgave her completely. She wasn't the villain. She was trapped between loyalty and truth, something I understood better than anyone. From then on, Lily helped me not loudly, not obviously, but in quiet ways. She confirmed things I suspected. She warned me when conversations happened behind closed doors. She never spoke against her brother, but she didn't protect him either. The days blurred together, the wedding looming closer like a storm cloud everyone admired from a distance. People kept telling me how lucky I was. "You found a good man," they said. "He adores you," they said. "You're glowing," they said. I nodded, smiled, played my part inside. Something steady and unbreakable was forming. I rewrote my vows late one night while Ethan was out with friends. I didn't cry as I wrote them. I didn't rage. I chose my words with care, like someone crafting a truth that didn't need to shout to be heard. This wasn't about revenge in the way movies portrayed it. No screaming, no chaos, no humiliation for the sake of spectacle. This was about dignity. I wasn't going to beg for love he'd already admitted he didn't feel. I wasn't going to expose him to hurt him. I was going to expose the truth and walk away whole. The night before the wedding, Ethan held me longer than usual. "Nervous?" he asked, a little. I said honestly. He smiled, satisfied. "You'll be fine. You always are." As he slept, his arm heavy around my waist, I stared into the darkness and felt something unexpected peace. Because for the first time since I'd met him, I wasn't hoping. I wasn't waiting. I knew exactly who he was. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. The calm before the storm isn't empty, it's focused. It's the quiet strength of someone who has already survived the worst part and is now choosing how the story will end. The wedding morning arrived wrapped in soft light and careful illusion. White fabric draped the venue like promises. Flowers filled the air with sweetness meant to disguise nerves, doubts, truths no one wanted to acknowledge. Laughter echoed through dressing rooms. Glasses clinked. Makeup brushes moved quickly over smiling faces. Everyone thought this was the beginning. For me, it was the ending. As I stood in my gown, the mirror reflected a woman who looked calm, composed, almost serene. There were no red eyes, no trembling hands. The storm had already passed through me and left clarity behind. When the music began, I walked down the aisle slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I was present. Every step felt deliberate. Ethan stood at the altar, handsome, confident, certain of his control. He smiled when he saw me, that practiced smile meant to reassure. I met his eyes and felt nothing but resolve. The ceremony flowed like a script everyone had memorized. Words about love, commitment, forever. Guests dabbed at their eyes. Phones were discreetly lowered. This was the moment everyone came for. Then it was time for the vows. Ethan went first. His voice was steady, warm, convincing. He spoke about partnership, devotion, choosing each other every day. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him. When he finished, he took my hands, waiting. I turned slightly, toward Lily. Confusion rippled through the crowd. I saw brows furrow, whispers begin. Lily's eyes widened as I lifted my hands. I signed. I learned this for you. I said with careful movements, "Because family matters to me." A hush fell over the room. Ethan stiffened. His fingers tightened around mine just enough to warn me, but it was too late. I continued signing, slower now, deliberate, and because I learned your language, I learned the truth. Gasps spread like wind through dry leaves. I released Ethan's hands and faced everyone. A week ago, I heard my fiancé say he didn't love me, that I was easy, predictable, convenient. Ethan shook his head, a soft laugh escaping him. "This isn't—" I raised a hand. "Please," I said calmly. "Don't." Silence obeyed me. I won't repeat every word. I continued. "Not because I'm protecting him, but because I don't need to. The truth stands on its own." I slipped the ring from my finger. The sound it made as I placed it in his palm was small, almost insignificant, but the meaning of it was thunder. I refuse to marry someone who confuses control with love. I said, I refuse to spend my life shrinking so someone else can feel powerful. Tears filled Ethan's eyes then, not from regret, but from loss of image, of certainty, of the story he thought he owned. I turned back to Lily and signed one final sentence. "Thank you for trying to protect me. You were never wrong." She covered her mouth, sobbing silently, her hands shaking as she signed back, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. Then I faced the guests. "I know this isn't what you expected," I said softly, "but it is what I deserve." I lifted my bouquet, placed it gently on the altar, and stepped away. No one stopped me. Not because they couldn't, but because they understood. I walked down the aisle alone, the same path I had entered with hope, now leaving with dignity. The doors opened, sunlight poured in, the world waited. Outside I breathed, really breathed. Weeks later, life looked different. Quieter, truer, the whispers faded, the shock dulled, and something new took root where heartbreak once lived. I kept learning sign language, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a symbol of survival. Because, sometimes, the strongest voice you'll ever have is the one you find after choosing yourself over a lie. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is walking away with your soul intact.